Hey, kia ora. Helen Brahms here, coming to you live from Sunset. No, whoop, back up. Brrr. Helen Brahms coming to you live from Surprise in Arizona. Hope you're having a super fantastic sparkling day. Oh my gosh, my day just got so more sparkly. I did a little thing. I'll show you in a minute. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 1142. Yes, I did get the right day. Excellent. I can cross that one off. Genealogy, almost done. Almost done with my certificate. Yeah, almost done with my certificate. There it is. I'm done. I actually had the broadcast ready to just click the live button. So everything was already done. And I thought, I only have 2 modules left to do. I wonder if I can knock them out before I go live. And so I got stuck in, I got them done. And as you can see right there, it is completed. I have my genealogy diploma from the Center of Excellence, which is based in the UK. All of their stuff was all about researching genealogy in the UK, in their records and everything else, which is where I spend a majority of my time for my ancestors, for my tree. So I am super happy to finally have this done. The last 2 modules was about presenting the family tree. The very last module was about having a genealogy business. But it's done. I am super, super excited about that. So yeah, so even though the thing says almost done, it's done. Now on to my next project. I now have to figure out what my next project's going to be. But yeah, when I actually did a couple of modules this morning, and then I was looking at these last 2 modules, and I thought, that's not going to. And I had a webinar, a presentation I was on this evening, and when that finished, I sort of looked at the clock and thought, well, I said I was going to go live at 7. Wonder if I can knock out these 2 modules, because they weren't very big modules. And so I got in there and done them, and I looked and said, 7:20. But hey, it's done. Yay, task completed. And my goal was to have it done before July 22nd. So I have absolutely smashed that one. My goal was to have 6 modules completed by tomorrow, because that was day 7. And because I said I'll get the first 6 modules done in day 7. And yeah, I've done all 11. So I am super, super, super excited to have that done, over and done with. Yay! Now I'm going to go email it to my parents. So what have I learned since yesterday? Quite a lot, actually. In fact, even though this was kind of a basics course, there was information in there that I was sort of like, oh, I didn't realize that, especially on the census records. Now, a lot of the census records I have looked at some of the British ones, but most of the ones that I work in for my clients and everything else are all US based. I've done I've done some Canadian ones as well. What other countries have I done? I think it's just Canada, US, and the UK. So, but what was interesting is that the first census that I've ever looked at for England, well, the earliest one I've ever looked at for England was 1841. And it turned out that was a significant time, because I discovered that the 1841 England and Wales census, yes, they were separate at the time, is considered to be the first modern census, because unlike previous censuses, which were conducted by local authorities, this census was centrally controlled and administered as a single event on the night of the 6th of June, 1841. And what was interesting about this one, which I didn't realize, but now makes a lot of sense. So this census, it basically would list, it had the name of the people that were in the household, had their ages, and I think it was their professions. Hang on. Sorry, I got to flip through my little notes here. Name, age, sex, and occupation, and address. That's all it had for the census. It didn't. So if you had people in a household, you didn't know how they were related. Through other methods, you could tell how they were related. But what was interesting is that up until the age of 15, all of the ages for the children were what they were at the time that the census was done. But for those over the age of 15, the problem is that for anyone over 15 years old, their ages were rounded down to the nearest 5. So if you were 29 on the census report, if you were 29 at the time the census was taken, they would show it as 25, which meant 1841, go back 25 years, was, what was it, 1816, but the person was actually born in 1812. So that can confuse. So now it's sort of like, oh my gosh, that makes so much more sense as to why the ages are out of whack so much when I'm researching my family tree genealogy on that, because I did not know that. There was, I guess, now at the beginning of if you get the census reports and stuff, and when you're researching, it brings up the pages that they think your family is on, and you can go yes, no. But if you go back to the very beginning of that census ledger, they actually have explanations at the beginning there, like how they, in some cases, you can find the enumerator's notes on how they were to conduct the census report. Well, especially here in the US, I'll have to find out if the same's for England, but how they were to conduct the census, what abbreviations they were to use, and other notes, and what they were looking for in some columns and things. So that was kind of interesting but it made sense. It's everything just sort of like went, oh my gosh, because I've been driving myself nuts going, well, they show this person here as being 20, but I've got, my record says that he was born 4 years, but 3 years that he should actually be 23, but they've got there as 20. And I'm like, oh, but at that point I didn't know about enumerator's notes. But in the 1851 census, they reported the ages correctly. And I thought, well, that's going to throw people out of whack too, because I could find them on the 1851 census. And when I went to the 1841 census, especially if they were adults, there was a discrepancy between the ages that ranged from 10 to 13, and when it said they were 10, because they had rounded down to the nearest 5, you had to add back in, somebody was 21. So you had to add back, said that they were 29, and they put them in the 1841 as 25. 10 years later, they're going to be supposedly 10 years older, but it's showing them at 39, not 35. And now I know why. So like, yay, that's a piece of the puzzle that's fallen into place. Awesome. So if you're ever looking at the English 1841 census and it says a 0 or a 5 for an adult, just remember that it could be that they were rounded down to the nearest 5. So they were, yeah. I'm like, that just, why? If you can put ages in there for the kids and be accurate on those, why could they not do it for adults? I don't know. But the 1851 census, they added place of birth, the relationship to the head of the house, and the marital status. And that stayed that way until 1891 when they added an employment status. And that stayed the same until 1911 when they did the nationality, duration of current marriage. And I love this one. Number of children that were born, number of children that are living, and number of children that died. So that can help you find families. And you're going, somebody mentioned that they had like 10 kids, but on the census report, they're only showing 6. And then you look at that other little comment, there was 4 that died. They had high mortality rates back then. And the British census was done on the years that ended in 1. US was on the years that ended in 0. And in the marital status, it was, whether they were married, widowed, even divorced, but they didn't show divorces in there. Here's the interesting thing, because people didn't want to be embarrassed with divorces, so they put themselves down as a widow. Because there was a lot of stigma. If you got divorced in the 1800s, there was a lot of stuff that went with that, including here in the States. So people, rather than saying that they were divorced, they would say they were widowed, because they got a W put next to their name. So they're either single, married, or widowed. Those are the only 3 Ds. Occasionally, you would catch a D in there for divorce, but most of the people that were divorced were embarrassed, and it had a stigma about it, even if it wasn't their fault, the reason for the divorce. So they told people that they were widowed. So that is something you have to be cautious of when you're looking at census reports and trying to match them up with death indexes and things like that, because you can use the census to help find these people on the birth index, how to find them on the marriage indexes and on the death indexes. But you have to be careful with the death ones, because they might say somebody is dead when in actual fact they're alive and kicking. It's just that they didn't want to admit that they were divorced. because of the bad stuff that happened around them. And usually it was the women that suffered for it rather than the men. So just be conscious of that one. The Scottish census took place around the same time that the English and Wales one did. So England and Wales were lumped together. Scotland had its own. Ireland had its own. And they were all conducted around the same time. But they said in Ireland that the census records have generally not survived till today. So that was kind of cool. And you could use it to connect families because you could see the locations. And if you found people with similar family names in there, were they cousins? Were they siblings? Were they, the parents in one house? Even on the same street, you might see, there's one census I looked at one for one family, and mum and dad lived in this house. Their son was next door in that one. Their daughter lived down the street. Another son of theirs lived down the street. So they had this whole street where there was a string of families that were all the same names. And it turned out that there was the parents. There were brothers and sisters of the parents that were in that same street, because you found those ones through the wife's ones through the maiden names. And then we also discovered that their children over the years had also bought up properties on that same street. So there was this whole street that was basically one family. And you could literally go from house to house and then figure out all the relationships and stuff. That was actually a pretty cool one to have a look at. Also looked at other sources for records, including like adoption records, or those most of the time those were sealed. So the adoption certificate would often give the adoptive name of the child, so what the child was now known as, and the new parents, and it would have their actual birth date on there, but there was no record on there on who the actual birth parents were. There was education, schools, colleges, universities. They hold all sorts of things, yearbook on them. The list of records available in education facilities is actually pretty cool if you know where to go and look. I always remember in my high school, and I only went to one high school, you'd go down like the Hall of Fame, and it was this hallway that went from the administrative area all the way down past the guidance counselor's office to the main foyer that was there for the assembly hall. And they would and it literally had every single class photograph up there with bits of tape underneath that said who was who in the pictures. So you could go down there and you could watch people progress through their time at high school. That was on one side. On the other side were all the sporting teams and things that they had throughout the years. And they're coming up on or just celebrated their like 60th anniversary for this high school. I can't remember. I think I got the 60th. I think the 60th is coming up in 2 years. I think 25 is going to be 60 years. I think the school opened in 1965. I'm not 100% sure on that. Don't quote me on that. I would have to go look it up because it's been a while. But yeah, they had all these all the class photographs up there. And I just enjoyed walking down there and finding, okay, let's look for this person. Did they stay? When did they leave? And you go down the photographs and find, oh, they're not in those pictures anymore. Okay, so they must have left sometime during those times. And it provided me with entertainment, if you want to call it that. But that was part of my genealogy thing that was starting to come out, was sort of like, they've got the same name. Are these siblings? And you'd find siblings in there. We did have an uncle and a niece at school one time together because they were around the same age. So we had all sorts of different family dynamics in there in the schools and stuff. And it was fun just following them through the photographs throughout the year. Immigration documents. Oh my gosh, immigration documents will show you, did that person arrive in the country by themselves or did they come with family? And you look through and is there similar name, or did the family follow later? Is the other way that you can look, because the other way you can look as well. So immigration were good. Military, they did say for the English military that about 60% of the World War I service records were burnt as a result of the enemy bombings during World War II. It's like, damn those bombings. But all is not lost, because if you visit your ancestors' hometowns, the local libraries, the local historical societies and stuff may actually have information about your ancestor and their service in World War I, because people were very much about the home, those that were born in the area that served the country. So they're very much about that. So you may even find military societies in those areas as well. But there's other ways that you can get that information. And some of this too would apply here in the US. If you can't find military information, go to the hometown where that ancestor was from. And is there anything there at the local historical society, at the museums or anything where they honor their military personnel? Is their names on the records and stuff like that as well? So that's another place. One of my favorite ones, newspapers. They talk about newspapers in here. And I just love going through the newspapers. I do, because you get their announcements of births, marriages, divorces, deaths, often in the personal columns, and then the national newspapers. Prominent families will be displayed in there. You'll get big obituaries in there for prominent families, and because there was no privacy issues back in I think they were still doing it up to the 70s. There was the names and possibly the address of the newborn's parents that might be contained in the birth announcement. And this is the same in England at the time too. So I'm thinking, yeah, I've seen it here in the States too. Marriage notices often mention the parents' names and may mention where the spouse is from if it is not local. Death notices might give indication as to where the burial took place, may also indicate the cause of death and disclose any suspicious circumstances or inquests that might have arisen. Then obituary might also be enclosed, providing insight to the person's life. Funeral notices will often invite the brother of, the sister of, the son of, etc., providing you with further relations to research. So it was kind of, and then there was like the prison record. Get this. I love the domain for this one. So they were talking about prison records as well, and how you have the black sheep in the family. So if you want to know if any of in England, if any of your relatives happen to make a visit to prison at any time for some crime they committed, you go to Black Sheep Ancestors. blacksheepancestors.com/UK. And I'm like, I got to go check that one out, because I hadn't heard of that domain before. And so I'm definitely going to go and check that one at blacksheepancestors.com/UK. Yeah. Oh, that's pretty cool. If you have black sheep in the family, you go to the Black Sheep website. They talked about workhouses and how you can find records for workhouses that may still be exist, especially in the local libraries where the workhouses were. Of course, probates for wills, professional directories. If they had a certain profession, you can find that information as well. Family records like Bibles, letters, books, certificates, and photograph albums can help with information too. And some of them, because it may not have been passed on, it could be in a local society and things. Another module I did today was royals and nobles, and that was interesting. You learned about the collapse of the tree. I think that's what it was called. Was it called that one? Where was it? Oh, pedigree collapse. And that's where you had the interfamily marriages happening. And it happened a lot in noble families because they wanted to keep the blood pure and all this sort of stuff. And plus, and it turned out to actually end up being like a population control thing as well, if you actually think about it. Because for every generation you double. So there's you at the bottom of the tree, then 2 parents, 4 grandparents. I can't do the next one because it's 8 great-grandparents, 16 second great-grandparents, 32 third great-grandparents, and you just keep doubling. But if you have, and the further back you go back in the thing, you start getting the intermarriages, the interfamily marriages happening as well, with people marrying cousins, second cousins, third cousins, that sort of thing. So you get that pedigree collapse in there. But what was interesting is that they said looking at lines of descent from the royalty has prompted mathematicians to make calculations which show that it is probable that every person of European descent is most likely related to Charlemagne, who was 747 to 1841, also known as Charles the Great or Charles the First. And it says whose descendants are known to have married into every European royal family. Some genealogists have argued that this would unlikely due to royal intermarriages. It's all over the place. It's not just a redneck thing that I keep hearing in jokes and stuff. It happened in all the families. If you go back far enough, you will find those sorts of things. So that's just some of the stuff that I have learned about today. Even connecting the sources and things when you're starting to pull things together to present the family tree. It helps you see the timelines of people's lives, and you can fill in the blanks with stories that you find, newspaper articles, listings and directories. There's other ways that you can find information to help fill in their lives a little bit, to give you a little more of a clue of who they were and how they lived. And even my favorite part, which I talk about often when I'm talking to people about family trees, is if you get stuck when you're going up your family tree and you get stuck, come back down and go sideways, because sometimes you've got to go sideways to go upwards. And there's actually a term for it. It's called climbing back down the tree. And I thought, I've been telling people that for ages. If you get stuck going up, come down and go sideways. Go to the siblings. What information can you find on the siblings that will help you find more information so you can keep moving up the tree again? And they talked about that in there too. And then it was like presenting the family tree in the format you're going to do it. Are you going to do it as a list? Are you going to do it as a book? Are you going to do it as articles? And quoting your sources and all of that sort of information. And then the last module was all about having a genealogy business and doing volunteer work as well. So it was a great class. I learned a lot out of it. A lot of it was basic, but I also learned a lot, especially on records for the UK, for England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. Different places, they give resources in there as well. And I like the little thing after all, they put all the resources. This is correct at the time of printing, and this was done in 2016. So I don't know how many of these websites. I know some of them are still around because I actually used some of them. But I'm going to go look at that black sheep one. That one just fascinated me. So certification is done. My genealogy diploma is now done. I got an my overall score was 98% because there was 2 modules. I got 1 question wrong in each one. And as soon as I hit the submit button, I was like, damn, I should have gone back and changed that answer. So I knew when I had gotten one wrong. So throughout the whole course, I only got 2 questions wrong. And so it gave me a 98% on the whole class. So next time I do a class through these guys, I'm going for 100% through all classes. That's what I'm going to do. And I have plenty of it's actually a great site, the Center of Excellence, because a lot of the stuff that you can do in there, because they've also given me a continuing education certificate as well to show that I have done 150 hours of continuing education. So I can now go and that'll be on next year's thing, because to be part of the Association of Professional Genealogists here in the States, you have to provide a list of the continuing education that you did the previous year in order to get your membership for that year. So this will go on my 2023 listing. And then because my 2022 stuff's already been handed in, so when it comes time to renew for 2023, I've already got the stuff submitted. And they like you submitting it early. You don't have to sit back and go, when did I do that? So this will be one that will go in there for 2023's continuing education credits. So for now, that's it from me. I'm out of here. I'm going to go take a DOG for WALK. Did you hear her? We're going to go for a walk, Zeffie? Where'd you go? Oh, she's actually lying on the other side of the curtain. I have about a gap about this much at the bottom of the curtain, and I can just see her legs as she's laying there on the tile. So we're going to go for our evening walk. A little darker than I would like, but anyway, I'm out of here. Go have a super fantastic, sparkling evening, and we'll catch you guys back here at 6 p.m. Pacific tomorrow. Hey, Conera.